Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project. More specifically in this instance, the work in progress Philips CD-i core. Because late last week, the CD-i core was added to update all, which means if you've updated your MiSTers recently, or if you haven't updated them in a while, you definitely should, because we have basically almost a full Philips CD-i within MiSTer FPGA. Yes, there's still a little bit missing, and we'll go over that later on in the video, but it's definitely fun, and definitely another nice piece of preservation, because Philips CD-i hardware is expensive these days, and it definitely requires some maintenance to keep running. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But honestly, obviously the CD-i is not some sort of spectacular hidden gem platform. It's not as bad as you've probably read, and it's not as good as you would hope, but there is definitely a lot of fun to be had on it. Something like Hotel Mario here, basic premise, but it does have a ton of charm to it. Of course, it takes place within the universe of Nintendo, and that's just because back in the day, if you're not aware, Nintendo and Sony had that partnership to bring the Super Nintendo CD to market, and that was abandoned, bringing us the PlayStation One as a competitor. Nintendo then signed an agreement with Philips to bring a CD attachment to the Super Nintendo, and that was also abandoned, but Philips still got the right to make games within certain franchises in Nintendo's IP. So that's why you have Hotel Mario, and that's why you're gonna have stuff like the infamous Zelda games, but they are fun to play. And honestly, outside of getting something like real Philips CD-i hardware, which is going to cost a fortune both for the game and the hardware in and of itself, MiSTer FPGA is going to be the best way in my opinion to play these games, because CD-i emulation can definitely be a little bit tricky to get set up as well. Leave me a comment down below and you tell me if you ever played Hotel Mario before, because I think a lot of people are going to be discovering some interesting games here. My personal favorite, and definitely the quote-unquote system seller for the CDI, is Burn Cycle. It's basically a light gun game with full motion video taking place in this kind of cyberpunk future, and it has an absolute vibe to it. Now just so you know, this does not use the MPEG cartridge, and that is something that is not yet 100% finalized within the core. Hopefully in the next month or two, something like that will get finished up, but there are going to be some games that just won't work right now because they do require that MPEG decoder card. And if you weren't aware, back in the day, the CD-i had an add-on attachment. You could basically slot that in and have MPEG decoding on the hardware, which is super popular back in the day. You had stuff like that on 3DO, on Sega Saturn, and of course on the CD-i. But if you're looking for one game just to sit down and play on the new update all CDI core, definitely make it Burn Cycle. I'm not saying it's a hidden gem, I'm just saying it's a ton of fun, and it really shows that when you incorporate full motion video and pre-rendered graphics correctly, you get a very charming game. Something like Burn Cycle, it just does everything right with the limited hardware, because the CDI was not a very powerful console. But the fact that developers on this were able to get this working on MiSTer in and of itself is absolutely outstanding, because it's not like the CDI is the most well documented piece of hardware around. Think about PlayStation 1, think about Sega Saturn, think about Nintendo 64. There's hundreds upon hundreds of people working on the hardware and emulation for it. There's so much knowledge out there. But if you go to something like the CDI, that overall developer base and that documentation base definitely gets a little bit thinner. So this is probably every bit as impressive, not more so than the PlayStation 1 N64 Saturn cores, just because you have to do it a lot more blindly than you had to with other hardware, which just makes it that much more impressive when you think about how you actually have to make these cores. And as far as the performance is concerned, I don't own a CDI, so I really can't compare against anything, but I have talked to people I know, the few indeed, that actually have a CDI and a MiSTer FPGA, because trust me, there's not a ton of overlap, and they've told me that it basically is doing everything you would expect a CDI to do, and it definitely doesn't break anywhere near as often as real CDI hardware, because there's definitely some chips on there on the CDI with the real-time clock that can be absolutely annoying to deal with apparently. I know a lot of people that had CDIs in their collection. I asked them to check on this, and about 3 people out of the 5 I asked went and told me that their CDI was no longer working and they had to get it repaired, and they couldn't help me check. So honestly, just from a preservation standpoint alone, not even a fun standpoint, having the CDI core is spectacular. We're going to go into the first soundtrack sample here in Burn Cycle because it has amazing music. 45 seconds, I'll be right back with a lot more games. I mean, the music in Burn Cycle is a total vibe, and honestly, it kind of sounds a little bit like knockoff Twin Peaks music from Angela Badalamenti. But as we move over to something like Wand of Gamelon, the Zelda games on this console are notorious for all the best and all the worst reasons. I'm not saying that these games are good, I'm not saying that they're bad. You can tell the developers tried, and there is some fun to be had, and you can definitely tell that they did their best when you play these games. But it's one of those things, they've almost become memes at this point in time. But as far as rare the Legend of Zelda games goes, these are definitely taking the top spot. And trust me, you do not want to actually buy a copy of these. They are quite expensive. Just play on MiSTer FPGA. And the good thing is, I've talked to other people that have tried these, and you can just play them from start to finish and see the credits scroll. They are definitely going to fight you. They're definitely going to feel antiquated, and they're not going to be anywhere near as fun as actual 2D Zelda games or anything else in the Zelda universe. But it is one of those things. They do exist. They are important from a historical standpoint, and they are probably some of the better quote-unquote games on the CD-i, because don't forget, the CD-i was never supposed to be just a game system. It was used for multimedia presentations and a lot of other software that will run in the core that would not be any way, shape, or form classified as a video game. And I'll show you one of the most famous ones in just a moment, because obviously every time anyone talks about CD-i, they don't just talk about the janky games, they also talk about all the other weird software that was available, because it's basically the generation where people are trying to sneak consoles into people's houses under the guise of entertainment and education. So that's why maybe you get a CD-i under the Christmas tree, because your parents didn't just want to buy you a video game console, they bought you something they also thought could be educational, and it ended up absolutely just never being used for that purpose. But trust me, Wand of Gamelon here is gonna basically just be a very difficult game. It is difficult, you have to solve a lot of puzzles, but it can be some fun, and definitely if you are a fan of The Legend of Zelda, it is a game worth checking out. But it honestly has some of the best worst voice acting of its generation, making games like The House of the Dead from Sega seem like Citizen Kane in comparison. So go ahead and listen to this Oscar-worthy performance, but come right back because I got more games to show you on the CD-i core.
Everyone ran when the Gleeok came, but monsters know better than bothering me. Here's a shroud that scares the wraps off Gibdo.
I mean, honestly, if that sounds like anyone, it sounds like the secretary from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and it is some hilarious voice acting, and that's why this game is every bit as infamous as it is famous. And don't forget, these cores do not make games any more fun than they would be on real hardware. So if you love the Wand of Gamelon, if you played it a lot, you're going to love it here. If you played it before and you absolutely hated it, there's absolutely nothing that the MiSTer FPGA core is going to do to improve your experience. And if you've never played this one before, I can't recommend it enough just as an experience. Definitely something you might want to bring a walkthrough along for the ride, just so you can understand what you're supposed to be doing. It'll make the game more enjoyable, but it's one of those things. It's such an odd, bizarre world version of The Legend of Zelda. It's definitely something you should experience if you're a fan. But I'm gonna go into the next soundtrack sample. Here we're going back to Hotel Mario, what I think is the best game on the system, and it also has a great soundtrack to boot. But don't go anywhere, because after the soundtrack sample, I'll show you the most famous title on the CD-i, the one that everyone always thinks of. But enjoy the music. I mean, it's fun music, and you gotta give the developers of Hotel Mario credit. They were able to make a game that actually is a video game that you want to play and is fun. It's definitely one of those titles. It's not going to live up to anything like Super Mario World, Yoshi's Island, or any other Nintendo-made Mario game, but there is a lot of charm here, and there is a decent amount of challenge. And again, if you wanted to play this on real hardware, between a copy of the game, if you wanted it on your shelf, and the actual CD-i, it would not be a cheap experience whatsoever. Let's move over to the objectively best game on the Philips CD-i, and that is the Burger King training video, because we're going to show you how to tuck some meat in between some buns today. And all jokes aside, this is just basically the other functionality of the CD-i, basically interactive training software. This does use the MPEG card, so you can't play it the whole way, but if you want to learn how to use the broiler from Burger King from the 90s, you have both the standard broiler and the self-return broiler as well. So leave me a comment down below, are you a standard broiler or self-return broiler fan? I would be curious. And obviously we've reached the kind of poking fun at the CD-i portion of the video, and this is is the Flowers of Robert Mapplethorpe, another piece of software that basically everyone knows about on the CD-i, and I feel like everyone has in their collection. The CD-i was a very weird piece of hardware. It was basically used as an interactive training kiosk, it was used as an educational appliance, and it was also used as a game console. And honestly, it never really excelled at any of those avenues, but it did exist and there are fun games to play. I don't think anyone's going to want to look at the Flowers of Robert Mapplethorpe on the CD-i. If you want to, just go to Google Images, but that's kind of the thing about the CD-i in and of itself. It has multiple different personalities, they're all a bit crazy, but it is fun, it is intriguing, and it is another piece of preservation on MiSTer FPGA, and you absolutely love to see that. But leave me a comment down below and tell me, were you one of the few who owned a CD-i back in the day, and what is your favorite game? But if you haven't updated recently, go to Update All and you'll have CD-i games today. Short of that, we're done. Enjoy a little bit of a very interesting looking flower, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.